I am interested in seeing if we can talk about the issue of what I call beautiful Drupal. You know, when people go to build websites, they don't first ask themselves, what CMS am I going to use? They say, what do I want to do, what's it going to look like, and how does it get there? And then from there, you choose what CMS you want to use. And so that means that when people, not us, but people who want websites from us, start to go look for somebody, the first thing they look for typically is a designer. And so we need to have more of those in order for Drupal to get bigger. We still like Drupal doubling every year, it's all that really good stuff. But if it's up to the people who just code to double every year, we'll reach a certain point and we'll stop. So in order to go farther than that, we have to get more designers because they're at the front end of the funnel. And so I'm spending a lot of my time in the next 6 to 12 months trying to figure out the problem of how do we grow the number and the impact of designers on Drupal. And since we're such a development-centric culture today in Drupal, it's a big job. So just in case some of you don't know about me, I thought I'd spend just a bit of an introduction about me. I'm not Dries, and I wasn't at Drupal at the start. This is Drupal at the start, when Dries was building it in his dorm room. And I don't go quite that far back, but I also don't go as far back as this, in DrupalCon Belgium. That's 2005, and I didn't join until a little later than that. But I do like Belgian beer, and because I like Belgian beer, I did go and meet up with Dries in 2007 in Antwerp, and as he was starting to think about finishing his degree and what did he want to do, I said, well, I know how to run open source businesses. Why don't we start an open source business around Drupal that's a little different? It's not a design shop. It's a Red Hat for Drupal kind of shop. So Acquia was born in the middle of 2007 in the shadow of the guild houses in Antwerp, so that Dries and I can memorialize that and believe that we would have a guild house-sized company at some point along the way as well. So Dries and I started Acquia in 2007, and I had some open source experience. I had run a company before that had an open source IP PBX that ended up getting sold to Nortel. But I didn't actually, we started that company with code first and then open sourced it after we had a product as a way to get to market. So we had not as big a community as Drupal did. Drupal obviously existed as a big project and a big community before Acquia showed up. And so I actually had to learn a lot about community from Dries. And part of the building design community is really about how do we successfully replicate some of the stuff that we did to build the developer community, but do that in the designer community. And one of the things that Dries really does well is he figures out how to put the community in control, not to keep control. Now there are a few key things you got to keep control of, and he keeps control of core and some things like that, but nonetheless, and chooses who the next core maintainers are, but more or less try to enable the community as much as possible. So we have to do the same thing in the designer community and enable the designer community to be in control of their own destiny in some way. However, communities can be a little daunting sometimes. They're not always easy. They pose a bunch of challenges and how to figure them out of various kinds. So figuring out how to deal with designers is one of the challenges. And in fact, designers in themselves, in general, well, can kind of have more different requirements. They don't think the same way. They don't generally have the same goals, ways of doing things, ways of thinking about approaches and all that kind of stuff. So in general, think of it as, ICANN has special requirements. I just had to throw in a picture of myself DJing at the party in Boston, so that's all I really had to do there. But no, designers do in fact have special requirements, different from what the rest of the Drupal.com, the rest of the Drupal developer organization has. They value different things. Here, code rules, right? It's really all about writing code, being able to sit down, turn out some of the most amazing code ever, and get respected for it. Design rules with designers. It's a different value system. It's not the same thing. So, for Earl, it works, his way. And it's bug-free, mostly. And it rocks. It's just really, really incredible code, and it's reusable, and people can do stuff with it and get leverage out of it. With designers, it's not like that. It's attractive. I know that it works, but does it look good? Does it actually accomplish the function we're trying to do? And make sure your bugs don't hurt it, because you know you have bugs, right? So figure out a way for me to be able to do something where you don't have bugs. And it's unique. Coders want to reuse. Now designers would probably like to reuse too, but in general, the customers don't want reuse. The customers may all want user-contributed content. They may all want forums and blogs and wikis, but they want them to look different from the next company over, the next person over who has that kind of a site. So uniqueness is actually a value, and reusability is the secondary value in the design community. So there's different things. The basic story here is that they are very different. At the same time, they share some common things. We have to figure out a way to leverage. They both want credit for their work. Common complaint amongst designers: how do I really earn my cred in the Drupal community? You know, you can get your credit in the Drupal community by having X number of check-ins into whatever, you know, project you're maintaining, or overall number of commits. That's how you gain your cred. How do you gain your cred in the design world, in the Drupal world? Both want that cred, but today the design world is set up, or the Drupal world is set up to reward Earl. It's not set up to reward the designers. Yeah. And so we have to think about, these are two different community goals or needs. They're not the same. Okay, take a breath. Have we gotten to a tipping point here where we might be at a moment of change? And I don't know why this slide says tipping point. It doesn't, but it's a cute slide, so I had to put it up there. This was the size of DrupalCon Brussels a couple of years later. If you look at that, we're actually bigger than that at this conference. There are more people here than were at that Brussels DrupalCon. That's an interestingly big. Studio and Skinner rock. I am not a techie anymore. I don't code that much anymore. I used to code a lot. But from what I can see and from what I can tell in the files, Studio and Skinner rocks, and we've got to figure out a way to do something with that. But that's an interesting tipping point. Does it change the way we think about building themes and building sites? There are more women here. Yay. As a percentage. Yay! So, highest percentage of women ever. That's a tipping point. So, but the basic question is still fundamentally, what do we do to take this community now that's here, that may be at a tipping point, and put this community in control? Because today, the coder community is building really good infrastructure. It's not very pretty. So we got to figure out a way to get this community to be able to do what it needs to do to put nice skins on that. The other thing, and this is going to be heresy, and I'm going to go out on the limb here with this a little bit of heresy, but sometimes politics holds back progress. The Drupal world is full of a lot of politics. Sometimes you might have to just ignore it and do what we need to do. So I didn't get time to grab a couple screenshots here, but a good example of this in my mind is DrupalModules.com. Big controversy when DrupalModules.com shows up because, you know, this is not, no, don't do that there. Do it somewhere else. Do it in Drupal.org or whatever. Drupal.org wasn't going to change anytime soon. DrupalModules.com is now actually a pretty useful resource. It paved the way. Now, in the Drupal.org redesign, we're going to get some of that back at Drupal.org, but it triggered action. It actually became a useful resource in the interim. And in the end, it was a good learning platform from which we could take something. So maybe sometimes you just have to screw politics and do it. So if we actually have to do something as a community outside of Drupal.org, heresy, maybe we should do it outside of Drupal.org. And then work en masse in a place where it's design friendly, and then find a way for that interface to work with Drupal.org the right way. Good example, how many times have you heard, designers don't like CVS, can't check in the theme, don't want to deal with that stuff. Well, maybe there's a place where designers upload zip files. And there's a set of people who care about new themes who will take those zip files, unzip them, but they're comfortable with CVS, and they'll check them, and they'll be the kind of interface between uploading a zip file and checking it into CVS. But the place where it gets done maybe isn't on D.O. Who knows? What about themes? We have a lot of themes in the world that aren't GPL. They're scattered around. There's no single place to find them. They're hard to find. Should they live in one place outside of D.O because D.O can only have GPL stuff? Heresy. Maybe it needs to get done. So I'm going to propose that maybe we think about doing some politically incorrect things. What I want to do with the next 40 minutes is actually not talk anymore, because I'm not a coder, I'm not a themer. One of the things that Dries and I got together with said, when we got together says, I promise not to write code. You promise not to like maybe do other things. But one of the things I can do is organize and try to find objectives and try to initiate action. So what I'd like to do today, if I can, is to use the rest of the time for you guys to do work here, real working sessions. There's a bunch of ways to think about how can we change what needs to get changed. First is identify the real problems, pick the ones where you can have a solution, and then find a way for people to actually get that solution done. Now I've been collecting lists of problems around for the last few days or couple weeks. This is kind of one list, one type of list, and this is the kind of thing that says designers need a new non-CVS way to get themes in. We have to have a way for designers to get cred. What's that going to be? We need to have cleaner HTML, coming out of Drupal. So a list of stuff, right? These are things that came up after my blog post, what should we do about themes? Got a lot of 50 plus comments. Great, thank you much feedback. There's another level of kind of comments, the things that were up on the board out there. Thank you people who did those. I want buttons and views to assign tags to fields without having to create a new TPL file. Those kinds of specifics. Whatever it is, whether it's the kind of more meta-level issues like this, or whether it's the more specific issues like this, I'd like to see if we can find a way to pick 10 questions, and then break up into groups of 5 or 10 people each. And the groups then we either decide as a group to do, all of us work on all 10 questions, or each group picks a question and says, look, we're going to come out of this with a solution to X, and somebody in this group is going to do X, whatever it is, and try to come out of here with 10 actionable items that we can leave here and do to actually make progress on some of the big issues people they think are preventing designers from getting something done. We've got 40 minutes left or so. I'd like to use the rest of that time to let this crowd do that. So it's hard to self-organize a whole bunch of people, and I don't exactly have a perfect plan for this. But I'd like to see if we can get some questions picked up and centered and then break people up. And I don't know how you want to come up with questions. Do you want to holler them out and I'll write them on the board? Do you want me to edit the list that's up here? Do you want to, anybody got an idea?
Edit the list.
Edit the list.
Can you go back to the last list? I think this is just too detailed, but maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, this is
Yeah, the deeper ones we can start.
Yeah.
Which list do you want to start with?
This one.
Show of hands. This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we add the list?
Yes, we can. I'm going to need to figure out how to move this thing over.
There we go.
I'm going to have to turn around and go this way. Yes. All right. So I'll add the list. Anybody want to add? So finish reading first, and then start to holler if you want to add.
I'd like to add something around. We brought it up at DrupalCon, and everyone was in love with the idea, and I don't know if it's gone anywhere. The menuing system needs to be extended so that there can be a simple button to add an ID or class, as many as a designer feels like. Because navigation is like one of the most difficult ways. It's like the first learning curve, and it's the easiest way to start implementing a design in Drupal. I feel like that would make it so much easier for.
Make it be a 7-sentence or 7-word thing to put on the list.
ID and class, add facility per menu item.
Jesus. Well, we have an ID for every menu item, but easier menu stuff.
There is a module that does that, so maybe saying move that module into core.
I don't know of a module that does it right that I found yet.
There's actually an issue for core to add it.
Right, yeah, we created the issue at
so-
DrupalCon, but it's just no one's done anything. And I know the code freeze is like in, was it September 1st or?
Yeah, September. Perhaps should we expand number 11 to include not just menu items, but lots of things like, because in the next page it says block class. Block class is going to be merged with Skinner. So maybe the idea of what Skinner does needs to be moved at least partially into core.
Yeah, I think once that functionality is written, it'll be easy to attach that to all kinds of things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a no-brainer. I mean, people should be able to add a class that and make Drupal output what they need, not
Right.
a bunch of.
Keep focused. New questions, new things that are worth spending time on. Yes.
If there's markup, it should be themable. It should be alterable in some way. There's certain areas within Drupal where you just can't get at the markup just because it's hard coded in there. It's not defunct of any sort.
Is that a contrib or a core?
Is that even trim or core?
That's core. I've had trouble getting at some of the menu stuff pulled together.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the menu system.
No, wait, stop.
This is a bit of a question on number 5, good base theme and core, but sort of taking it bigger, how much of the people that sort of maintain core and are involved in getting core developed, is there any sort of buy-in to sort of add a theme component and some sort of more administrative structure to how theming relates to core? Do you know what I'm saying?
So we want to expand on that somehow?
Um,
I don't know what to do.
I'm thinking more of, sort of buy-in to maybe structuring theming in the community like cores. Am I making any sense?
Not to me. Maybe to somebody else.
You said like Trees has control of who contributes to core,
You want a theme core.
but is there like a theme core?
Like
Like
a
a
bunch
team
of
of people who
bunch of
like.
people
Oh, so
who
here's an
design
interesting
things.
thing.
This
who
is
are
good,
gonna
this
be
is
like-
that.
Let's look at this
We're gonna sort of
differently.
coordinate with the Drupal core team to make something that.
The
Yeah.
security
supports
team,
this
there's
world.
So we need
there's
like-
something, there's a
Call it
Docs
the-
team,
The
there's a
design
infrastructure team.
police.
Yeah.
With the
Well, that is basically what it is. We need a
Yes.
bunch of people saying, okay, dear developers, you don't know design at all. We know design. We're going to decide what is good and what is bad.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about design, what always happens is people can get hurt. And we as designers are kind of, hey, I'm putting my heart and my soul into this stuff. And if somebody, as a coding guy, says to me, it sucks, I'm going to get pissed off. But if it's a bunch of demons of designers say, well, Morten, that design is not that good. It's not good enough for core.
Yeah, if there's
this or
if
that.
similar to the security team and ops teams, if there's a set of folks that say, we'll look at this in an objective way, and we have the ability to kind of provide weight to the Drupal developer community and say the design team says yes, the developers say no, screw the developers, the designers win here in this case. Yes, up here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a strong value for quality code in the development community, but not a strong value for web standards. And I'd love to see the Drupal developer community value web standards and value some.
How do we actionalize that?
We need to get salesmen in the next
I mean,
conference.
I've had so many debates with developers, and they're like, I'm like, you cannot make a module that outputs table-based HTML. I'm just not going to use it. And they're like, I don't care, blah, 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 blah. And it's very hard to convince them. They don't want to learn CSS layouts.
Okay,
Part of
a lot of these
reasons-
things I'm trying to do here are things that where we can get an actionalizable thing to happen. How do we get, is that something that's actionalizable? Can we actually do something ourselves that will make that happen?
It would be easy if we all agreed, and there's been like debate just within the design community over there. Like
Yeah.
this, Morten kind of talked about that yesterday, so.
It's not more of a contrib problem, my core, I think, is really doing the same.
I think it's about leadership. I think it's about leadership and values and shifting so that there's something from the Drupal Association or some kind of, I mean, it goes.
I hope I don't, I
Goes
hope
to
I
the
don't offend you,
above
but I'm going to say, let's make that a goal of a design team to
Right.
actually try to get that.
Right.
And along with
Yeah,
this,
part of that we could do to actually actualize that is to provide cut and paste alternatives. If they don't know how, I mean, there's some places that you should use a table. Never try to organize information in a div tag alphabetically. Just use a table. But that's already set in place. But if we can have a repository saying, like we often want with this developers, we want to say, hey, give us an example so we can copy it and learn from it. We have to do the reverse. So we have to say, this is an example of how code in a themable environment should be created according to standards. And that's the document that we could set up. So that's
Kind of like
actually
a guide to developers that tells them how to work the theme.
not even a list, create samples.
Yes, next.
Okay.
Somebody up top.
Okay, awesome.
You had a great suggestion last night, so let's hear it.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments on the questions you already said. On the non-custom themes need to be linked to a purpose. I think a simple tagging system for themes where it says like this is best for this type of project would be a really easy way to search a theme. Like if I'm doing an e-commerce site, I can look up a whole taxonomy on e-commerce sites. And it's a really simple thing. And then I don't even know if they're doing
was an issue that we told me last night. Module developers or core places need to tell me what stuff they need themed. What
Yes.
stuff is going to be output.
Yes, okay.
I need a nice central
that-
list. Tell me
so
what
that
I need
one
when I'm
was-
building a theme. Tell me what stuff I got to do. Is that
Exactly, yeah, so whatever it outputs, I wanna see,
is that a
this
useful
thing
thing?
is called this thing is called that, etc.
Is that a useful thing to have here?
Yeah.
Feedback.
So what it is, pre-tag is, it outputs describing the markup, like, it's a very base start.
Next.
Should every module, like on a project, on their actual project page, have a separate theme section, so that there's, for every module is a relevant information just important for designers? That's complicated.
Not all modules have design, user
Well,
interface
and there should be an
impacts, but
XSANA or something in the
Are we gonna break out into groups?
yes, in a moment. In a moment here. All right, so lots of stuff here. Do we want to do this where we try to divvy this up and have different groups get passionate about a particular thing and then work on that thing, or what?
Like 2 or 3 things. Maybe.
Or do you still have new questions, or is this? Okay, we'll take 1 or 2 new questions. Do you have one?
Yes, mine is sort of in framing all this is, aside from here at this conference, how do we get a critical mass behind this? There is the Design for Drupal group on groups.drupal.org, but there's a separate group on groups.drupal.org for Drupal.org redesign, which touched on some of these things, and we're kind of balkanized, and groups.drupal.org itself is kind of a backwater. Is there a way that we can gain some momentum and collectively build a bigger voice to advocate these things?
I think that's number 14 now, right? Isn't that the design team?
Yeah.
It all
Is
comes
it?
down to the leadership. All these
How do you
things
get the design team?
Well, that's what I was going to add to the design team thing. We
Hang
have
on, you have one. Yeah.
This is obviously bigger than what we have time for today, but maybe we can come up with just ideas for a better user interface for streamers. Because I feel like it's completely decentralized in terms of how we have to access things in order to theme. And there's a huge barrier in terms of how many, we have to learn CSS, PHP, jQuery, Drupal structure. There's a lot of things, a lot of barriers, I think, between a designer and actually theming.
Were you in Skinner yesterday? Were you in the talk on Skinner?
No.
You should go see that before I put that up here.
Okay.
All right, so let's do this. We've got 25, maybe 30 if we want to run over a little something like that. What's next, by the way? Is there a hard stop here, Susan?
There's a bunch of sessions that start at 11.
Okay, so we have hard stops. So 25 minutes. How do you want to do this? Do you want to all talk about these in little groups, and then we can come together in the end to have one person from each of the group and say, here are the 2 or 3 things that we thought were compelling, or do people want to organize around a particular topic and say, I'm interested in number 13, and I'll have ideas, anybody else who wants to do 13?
One thing, maybe, because all these points seem to center around having some core group of people who are authoritative when it comes to design and help lead the design element. And it seems to me that it's the extent that we can try to establish that group, that small group, that's what one area we could focus on to kind of start tackling all of that.
Can I say something?
Because it looks like the design community doesn't have like their core group of people.
Possibly there's a counter argument to that, but go ahead.
Here's what I wanted to say. The design team, all this is like the balkanization. We all need to be flying the same flag and have a central meeting point, which is what you kind of mentioned about maybe having the design for Drupal, like what we use for this conference. There needs to be a clear path to democracy within the community. There are people that are sort of permanent members of the Drupal Association. In theory, we vote on certain things. I've never been given a ballot, and I'm a member of the Drupal Association. It's a little closed. It needs to be opened up, and there needs to be a clear path to adding the team and say, going to the association and say, we need a design team. I think y'all recognize that. Here's our nominees, and here's the people we want to represent the community.
So,
As a member of the General Assembly, the Drupal Association does not have any mission or control over what happens in the community, the code, or anything. The Drupal Association is about the events and education and cultivating community, but how the community organizes itself is beyond the Drupal Association's authority or where anyone in that group wants to go. It's not
Precisely.
a power center and deliberately avoiding it.
And frankly, by the way, so going kind of the other, this also relates to your comment, things actually happen in the Drupal community not by groups getting together and forcing their will. They happen because an individual takes an initiative and does something, and then somebody else adds on that, and somebody else adds on, and somebody else adds on that. The way to get this done is individual action on a bunch of things that actually that matter. And not necessarily trying to create a force. Now, at some point, if these other teams arose out of a need that actually was, gee, we got a security problem, what are we going to do about it? Or we have, a crisis in the server melting down, what are we going to do? We have to get a team of people. Those team of people came together with individual actions and said, I'll take this part of it and go do that. So if we want to do something around a design team, it means people standing up and saying, I'll take this part of it and go do that. It's not just, hey, I want to be on a team. And those are like trade associations. They don't work.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, Dries and Angie don't know everything about JavaScript or all the different things that go on in Drupal. They have people that they rely on and they go to for certain things.
Right,
And
so
say,
be that.
what does this look like? Well, we don't have anybody for really design and thinking like that at the moment. And the way you become like that is you speak up, you give your voice, and they see you, and then they realize you know what you're talking about. So when stuff comes up, they'll ping and say, what do you think about this? What's going on here if there's anything like that? And really it's by action that you become go-to people within changing things.
So, are there some specific things we want to do out of this? Let's maybe think about doing this way. Let's split down the 4 ways. Up the middle here, so we have this section here, these folks over here, this section here, and these folks over here. And pick anything from here that you want and try to come out of that with 2 or 3 specific things you think you can do. By the way, let's get some of the people who are here to go with the first time, just Steve or not. But see if you can pick 2 or 3 specific things you can do in the next 30 days that will affect some of these. And then at about 7 or 8 minutes till, we'll come back and we'll have somebody from each group say, hey, here's the 2 things we're going to do in the next 30 days and try to fix one of these, whatever they may be. And by the way, if you want me to add these other things to this other slide, the next slide down, I'll be happy to do that. The little kind of specific things, because those might even be good to do too, so I can just stick them up here.
Shouldn't we just get the other groups based on interest rather than...
Okay, fine. But that means we have to identify the groups of interest.
Okay, I think we have one group that's actually just the HTML crack, and we have one about the getting the designers, doing that design, the design police. And isn't that more or less that? Isn't it? So literally it's like good base themes and stuff, either it's like visual or it's the HTML that's sparking us.
Well, I'll take on documentation and anything that has to do with communicating guidelines for developers and things like that.
Okay, you got that. Good HTML output there.
I'm the HTML motherfucker.
CVS, alternatives. Who else wants to be passionate around something? Design, good base theme and core.
Snippet repository.
Design team for core.
There's one that I'd like to see, and I don't know the answer to this, but number 2, a way for designers to get bread. This is a huge thing.
Great, you own it. Who else wants to own something? There was a snippets. Somebody wanted to own snippets? Snippets?
You want to talk about snippets?
Yeah.
There was already a docs volunteer. What?
Docs and snippets, is that the same thing?
Docs for designers. That's here.
Oh, that's good, okay.
Yep.
Number 11, there's somebody who's not here already has it.
Okay. So, owners, go find a corner. People who want to be involved in that stuff. Documentation, HTML, CVS zip stuff. Find a corner and talk, and come back with some things you want to do specifically in 10 minutes.
Docs and snippets.